Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Aaron, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. I'm Mim Abbey, and I'm here today with Eunicia Perrette, who is going to talk with us about the stress of advancing your career and growing a business from a financial standpoint. So, Eunicia, let's just jump right in. What are the financial stresses that you hear from your clients as they are working on growing their careers? They're working on growing their business.
Mim, that's a great question. And the reality is that it's not as easy and it's not the same for everyone. So we'll kind of touch on maybe the top three. One of the big ones that we see is that individuals do not prioritize their own wealth. When it comes to how do we grow our wealth, oftentimes they'll be thinking about, I'm growing a career or I'm growing a business, I'm growing my practice. And so we're going to put everything there. And what ends up happening on the other side of the story is when, as time goes on, they realize that, oh my goodness, I put all of the eggs in one basket. And that's never the right solution. The other stressor that a lot of individuals have is this notion of, I feel that I should be doing more, but I don't quite know what. And so when it comes to that feeling, we talk a lot about feelings on the podcast and just in general. When the individual feels that they should be doing more, but they don't know what, they need to really take a pause and figure out, where do I turn to identify what is potentially that domino effect, and how do we start getting those questions answered in order to make sure that we can put that question behind and we can move on to the next question. And then the other stressor that I see oftentimes with individuals is this notion of, I will be okay. I'm just going to put it on and put it off and it'll be fine. But what ends up happening is, you'll notice we're thinking about, we'll put it off and it's going to out of sight, out of mind. But that out of sight, out of mind isn't really out of sight, out of mind. It keeps coming back. It shows back up as a stressor because we've dismissed it, and it comes back because it needs attention. So because it needs attention and it comes back, it creates the stress within us of, I should do it, but I don't have time. I should do it, but I'm afraid. I should do it, but fill in the blank. Everybody has a different reason why they're not doing it. But just the sheer pushing it away creates a stressor that's huge, simply because we're not leaning in. We're not facing the challenge as we see it or as it presents itself, whether it be money or anything else in our life.
Just incredible. And I am so sure that resonates with people, is that you're not prioritizing your own wealth because, of course, you're pouring into the business. You're pouring into the business and you're just kicking it down the road. Not a good idea. So interesting. And that nagging feeling that you should be doing more. You mentioned these are like these missteps, Eunicia. You mentioned, I'll be okay, and you're just putting it off. What other missteps, if any, do you see people making?
Oftentimes individuals will just simply rely on somebody else. As human beings, okay, it's in our nature to want to just be okay, knowing that somebody else is going to handle stuff that maybe we don't want to handle, or it's too uncomfortable for us, or we don't have the time. And the reality is that, at least for our clients, we work with a lot of very, very smart individuals. And listen, they have businesses, they're highly educated, they're highly compensated. And the last thing that they can do, or they should be doing, is to try to figure out, how do we build wealth? It's not just about, I'm going to invest here or I'm going to invest there. It's about the strategy that's behind it. And so, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, when we're relying and we just want somebody else to do it for us, an interesting thing happens is we want them to do it for us, and somehow we want them or us to vicariously live through their experiences, but we truly want everything optimized. But here's the deal. We are not the other person. We are not whomever we're working with. Neither are they us. So when we're dealing with money and wealth and building that wealth, it's the kinds of things that they're personal. And what I tell our clients is I don't need them to learn how to do it. I need them to understand what are their options. And as you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about the different types of investment accounts that you have, ask yourself the question of, when it comes to retirement, do you truly understand the different options that you have at your disposal? Or do you just have a 401k or you have an IRA and you think you're going to be okay because someone told you that you'll be fine? You'll be set for retirement. What does that mean? What we tell our clients is, listen, if we've got the 401k or the IRA, we need to look at how will that money need to potentially transform? Will it be treated the same in retirement, or does it need to change forms in order for that $1 that you're expecting in retirement to, guess what? Maybe we can make it two. But the only way we can do that is to start planning early, to actually have a strategy plan in place that works for you, not for me, not for the neighbor, not for some financial advisor that, told you you're going to be okay. This is not about someone else telling us what to do. This is about us working together with our experts, with our financial team to understand what are our solutions. What are the different options that we have at our disposal? And what happens in that change of dynamic, we're no longer relying on somebody telling us what to do, but rather we have a seat at our own financial table to say, this is what feels better versus not.
Eunicia, this is groundbreaking. And what I'm hearing you say is people rely on others. Oh, they'll handle it. They'll rely on, it sounds like what you're saying is the conventional means, the traditional means, the traditional advice of, yes, just put it in that. You've got the IRA, you've got the 401k, and we're investing that. And that's that. And then they run off about their merry way. But you're suggesting something very different. And I really like that last thing you said, which was have a seat at your own financial table, and couple that with what you said, which was you don't need people to do this all on their own. That's not what you're talking about. They're an expert in their business. They don't need to be an expert in this business. So you're talking about something very unique that's beyond the conventional model. And that's also not the pressure on people that I have to know everything in an area that's not my domain.
That's precisely it. Because that's one of the biggest fears, man. People don't, they have this fear that I don't know it. Maybe I should. So I'm just going to trust somebody else because they're going to do the best thing for me. Think of it this way. And I'm not the biggest of sports fans, but the analogy that I use is one that resonates very often with individuals. Is the equivalent of you having playoff tickets to whatever the playoff of your choice, right? It's the final game of the season and you've worked really hard and you've paid a lot of money for these tickets and you really want to be there. But you're saying the following, you know what? XYZ, whomever your best friend or your financial advisor, your CP or whoever they are, you just tell them, I want you to take those tickets. I want you to go to the game and I want to make sure that I have the same experience that you're going to have by taking these tickets and taking my place in that game, in that arena. Is that doable? Of course not. How could we possibly experience even their emotions, let alone how we would want to experience being there on that field or in that arena with our favorite team? And so if we wouldn't ever do that with something as simple as playoff tickets, why is it that so many individuals are taking their entire wealth and they're trusting in the hands of one person and they have no checks and balances? And listen, if you're listening to this podcast, we know that you're successful. Clearly, by the name of the show, you're successful, but you're struggling, not because you're struggling with money, you're struggling with having access to the solutions that maybe resonate with you because you don't even know what those solutions are. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I'm talking about understanding so that whatever gets implemented is in alignment to who you are. And you can actually be part of that experience and have it be the equivalent of you're there in the arena versus just asking somebody to do it for you and hoping that maybe you'll experience the same feelings.
Eunicia, I have to ask, why isn't anyone else talking this way?
Because it's too hard. because it's not the norm, because nobody's incentivized to do it. Financial services as an industry is not incentivized to sit down with clients for hours and hours and walk them through, here are the different options. Because let's be honest, the whole idea is when you sit down with anybody in financial services, except when you're working with Excelstra, there's this idea of, here's something that I think will benefit you greatly. 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes in a 45 or an hour minute call. Maybe you have 2 sessions, okay? And now you just bought something that you don't even know or understand. How exactly does it fit with your end to end? And so when we realized that it's not a thing, we said, you know what? We have to figure out what are those blind spots? What are those pitfalls? And that's exactly what we work on with our clients day in and day out, because nobody else is. And what we see is massive losses of financial success, really, to things that we could control and we could stop that leakage. But instead, that spigot continues to be open, and open year over year amounts to massive, massive amounts of wealth just literally going down the drain.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So we need some advice here. What's your financial advice for people who are advancing in their careers, advancing their business? What's your financial advice for them to minimize the stress involved?
To minimize the stress involved, you really need to dig deep to understand what are the questions that you have. Because like I said at the very beginning, your questions are going to be very different than somebody else's. They might be similar, but they're going to have different nuances. Once you understand those questions, reach out to someone, ask questions. You can, of course, always reach out to me, always reach out to Excelstra. We'll be here to just even be able to point you in the right direction. But if you feel that your questions, maybe you've asked them and you're being met with the same responses year over year, meeting after meeting, isn't it time that you start focusing in on why? Let's ask the question of why, so that we can get past those nagging questions. They're there now. Because what happens, listen, once we're on the other side, the questions will continue piling on. Don't get me wrong. It's not that we're going to answer this question that you have and it's just going to go away. Your wealth, like we call it, your wealth building platform will continue to enhance, will continue to grow. And as it grows, those questions will morph, those questions will change. But we're not going to get to the next level questions. We're not going to get to the next level solutions. And we're certainly not going to get to the next level optimization until and only when we're going to stop for a moment. We're going to ask the questions that we have. We're going to identify what works, what doesn't work. And then we put in a plan to make sure that you feel comfortable. You have to feel comfortable with where you're at.
It sounds like a faithful and committed process of working, how you work with your clients at Excelstra.
It is. And it really truly starts, Mim, at you have to be willing to ask the question. If it's in your mind, oftentimes individuals will think, yeah, but it's such a silly question, or it's such a stupid question. Fill in the blank, whatever you want to call those questions, right? They're not silly. They're not stupid. They're not even ignorant. They are questions that are genuine and are true to you. And guess what? Everybody else is either dealing with them or has already dealt with them. And so what you need to figure out for yourself is how do you deal with that question so that you can then elevate to the next level and continue on from there.
Yeah, you just hit on something really big that I want to be sure we focus on, and that is that idea of there really is no bad question. There really is no stupid question. You know, we get to a point, depending on the generation that someone was raised in, for so many of us, we did not get a robust financial education growing up. In my family, it was impolite to talk about money. Money was something that was sort of from the old, the dark ages of it's money's a dirty word. You don't talk about it in polite circles. And so getting a financial education was not high on the plan. And I know there's a lot of people out there like it, and they're smart and they're intelligent and they are successful. But being willing to ask that question where you think, in fact, I was working with a group of financial professionals with a large financial institution client of mine this week. And it was so amazing to watch one person asked, they're all financial professionals and they're all bankers, but they're from different parts of the banking world. And one person was talking about interest rate swaps. And another person asked, what's an interest rate swap? And they said, I'm embarrassed to ask the question, but I'm going to ask the question because I don't know what this is. And they said, of course not, because it's not your domain. It's not your area. So I hear what you're saying. And that is, don't be afraid. Ask the question. Ask it sooner rather than later. Time matters. Ask it now.
Absolutely. Listen, there's a reason why when it comes to what we do as a company, we actually have financial professionals that will come to us to say, hey, I've got a client that's struggling significantly with paying in taxes. This is not my area of expertise. Can you help? And the answer is, of course, yes, because the whole idea is, while the industry may not be incentivized to collaborate and work together, cross collaborate and have everybody at the same table, our philosophy is that when we do that, you're right, there is no such thing as a stupid question. And why would we put somebody whose area of expertise should not be on tech strategy to force them? It's kind of like, I was talking about this on another podcast yesterday. It's the similarity to trying to draw water from a dry well. It's not going to come. You might get a drip or two, but do you even want to drink that water? That's the same thing, right? Just talk to the right people, make sure that the right people are at the table and ask the questions, and just know that it's not a stupid question. If you're ever asking that question and somebody was to say, oh, I can't believe you asked that question, or would make you feel less than just because you asked that question, well, then ask yourself, is that the kind of person, is that how you want to be treated? Is that the kind of person you want to work with? And the answer may be very simple, probably not. Then what are we doing in those types of relationships? Those relationships need to be nurturing. You need to feel like you're building towards something, not away from something or for someone else to just appease them, because that's what feels right.
So good. So good. And I really like the metaphors you've used. You talked about that attending the sporting event metaphor. And that's the kind of thing I can hear that you bring to your clients to break things down, to help things be understandable based on their level of expertise. Maybe they've got a lot of financial background and maybe they don't. Either way, I can hear that you have that capability and that commitment to talk with them in whatever way is most useful for them. So what an important way to go. Unicia, we've talked about so much here, is that the fact that people don't prioritize their own wealth when they're building a business and building a career, they're putting it into the business, or that idea of I'll be okay and putting it off. And the idea of trusting somebody else and just having somebody else do it, but not really having a seat at your own financial table. And the big advice here, it sounds like, is don't be afraid to ask the questions. So what do you recommend as a next step for people, Unicia?
Well, as a next step, obviously, it would be very simple. Just book a call with Excelstra and let's figure out what your questions are most importantly. But if you're not at that level, or you don't feel ready yet, that's okay. In terms of the next step, I would say, if you want to kind of try things and figure out what it looks like, just sit down with where you're at and take a pulse, take an inventory of what all do I have going on, and what questions do you have as they relate to each one of those? And sit down with whomever you're working with right now. Start asking those questions so that you can kind of get to the next level. And then when you're ready to elevate it and step it up, we can have a conversation. But there's something that you can do right now, because I know that right now you've got questions. Let's start getting those questions behind you. And then I promise you, the next level is going to be, there's still going to be questions, but your questions are going to be that much more robust. And frankly, they're going to be more robust because you're truly starting to you're probably already growing wealth, but now you're starting to optimize it. Now you're starting to keep more of what you earn. And when you do that, it's just magical. It truly is.
Sounds magical. Thank you so much, Unicia. And thank you for joining us for the Successful But Struggling podcast. And stay tuned, because another episode is coming right up.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website And number 2, tune in to the next episode.